Before the first cities rose up, before kings claimed their thrones, and way before history even had a name, there was this incredible moment. Can you imagine it? A moment lost in the dust of time, where everything changed forever the very first human opened its eyes. This wasn't just any birth. It was like the sky itself shaped this being, a creation not born of nature, but crafted by divine hands. And guess what? The gods who brought this being to life didn't throw a party. Nope, they stood back and watched in silence. They knew deep down that something monumental had begun, something that could never be reversed. The chamber where it all happened was freezing cold, with stone walls etched with symbols that were ancient even before language existed. The air felt thick, almost as if the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. And there, on the ground, lay this first creation, a vessel of clay mixed with something otherworldly, the Anunnaki. Towering figures of radiant light surrounded it. They looked unchanging, almost like statues. But one stepped forward, its presence commanding. When it spoke, it wasn't with sound. It was a command that resonated deep within. Then, just like that, the being moved, fingers twitched, chest rose, and eyes opened for the very first time, gazing into a world it couldn't comprehend. And that first breath? It was a game changer. Earth was never going to be the same again. They called this creation a servant, a worker, a solution to their needs. But here's the kicker. Humanity was never meant to be free, just useful. The Anunnaki came to Earth for a purpose, resources, survival, you name it. In their minds, creating this being was merely about making a tool. But this human, it looked up, not like an animal or a machine, but with something deeper, a sense of awareness. One of the Anunnaki couldn't help but whisper, "This one sees too deeply." And that's when things started to get interesting. As days turned into nights, the humans multiplied. More vessels were created, more breaths taken, and more life emerged. They were taught to carry burdens, to build, to obey. But here's the twist. At night, when the gods returned to their heavenly abodes, the humans stayed behind. Gathered around fires, they began to do something unexpected. They stared up at the stars and wondered. They didn't have the words yet, but they had questions. And let me tell you, questions are powerful because curiosity is the first step to freedom. In the dawn of time, long before our recorded history, Earth was a different place. Vast, untamed, and rich with resources yet untouched. It was into this primordial world that beings of immense power and advanced knowledge descended from the heavens. They were the Anunnaki, the Shining Ones, who came from a distant planet, driven by a desperate need to save their own world. Their atmosphere was failing, and they needed one precious element to mend it: gold. Earth was abundant with this metal, but the labor to extract it was grueling, even for these powerful beings. The lesser Anunnaki toiled for eons in the mines, their bodies weary, their spirits broken. A rebellion was brewing. They cried out to their leaders, Enlil and Enki, pleading for relief from their endless servitude. It was Enki, the brilliant scientist and master of genetics, who proposed a radical solution. They would create a primitive worker, a being to bear the burden of their labor. Using their own genetic essence and combining it with the most evolved primate on Earth, they engineered a new species. They called it the Lulu, the mixed one. The first human, Adamu, was formed from the clay of the earth, infused with the divine breath of the Anunnaki. This new being was strong, adaptable, and intelligent enough to understand commands. Soon, more were created, and humanity began to populate the lands of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Their purpose was simple and singular: to serve. Day after day, under the scorching sun of ancient Eden, they labored. They dug the earth, carried heavy loads of ore, and processed the precious gold that their masters required. Their lives were a cycle of toil and rest, governed by the rising and setting of the sun. The Anunnaki watched over them from their magnificent ziggurats, their sky chariots casting long shadows over the working fields. These gods were a constant presence, their technology indistinguishable from magic, their commands absolute. For a long time, this was enough. The humans worked without question, their minds occupied only with the tasks at hand. But within the genetic code gifted to them by Enki, there was a spark, a seed of something more, a capacity for awareness that the Anunnaki had perhaps underestimated. As generations passed, this spark began to flicker into a flame. It started subtly. A pause in their work, a glance upwards at the sky chariots streaking across the heavens like fiery comets. A moment of wonder at the intricate patterns of the Anunnaki's energy weapons, which could level mountains in an instant. They saw their gods living in opulence, wielding powers that defied comprehension, while they themselves lived in simple reed huts, their days defined by sweat and dust. The true awakening, however, happened under the cloak of night, when the day's hard labor was done and the Anunnaki had retreated to their celestial abodes. The humans would gather around their fires. They would look up at the vast, star-dusted canopy above, the same stars their masters navigated with such ease, and they began to ask questions. At first, the questions were whispered, tentative thoughts shared between trusted friends. Why do we toil while they rest? Where do they go when they rise into the sky? They taught us to count, to build, to mine. But they never told us why. What is the purpose of all this gold we pull from the heart of the earth? Who are we, really? A young man named Adapa was among the first to voice these thoughts aloud. He was known for his quick mind and observant eyes. One evening, he pointed towards a particularly bright star, a star the Anunnaki called Nibiru, their home. They came from there, he said, his voice low but clear. They are not of this earth. So why are we here? Were we created only to be their tools, their living plows? His words hung in the still night air, echoing the silent questions in everyone's hearts. An elder, weary from a lifetime of service, shook his head. Do not speak such things, Adapa. The gods gave us life. We owe them our obedience. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The humans started to observe their masters more closely. They noticed the disputes between them, the rivalry between the stern commander and Lil, who saw humans as mere tools, and the more compassionate scientist Enki, who seemed to view his creation with a flicker of paternal pride, and perhaps regret. This growing curiosity did not go unnoticed. The Anunnaki had monitors, devices that observed the settlements. And Lil grew wary. He had argued against giving the Lulu too much intelligence. They are becoming like us, he warned his council. They question. A tool that questions is no longer a tool. It is a threat. He advocated for stricter controls, for culling the population, for wiping their memories and starting anew. But Enki resisted. He saw in humanity's emerging consciousness a reflection of his own creative genius. He had intentionally given them the capacity to evolve, to think, to feel. To him, they were more than just workers. They were his children. He began to visit the human settlements in secret, disguised, speaking to them not as a god to a slave, but as a teacher to a student. He shared fragments of knowledge, hinting at the secrets of the cosmos, nurturing the fire of their curiosity. The tension was palpable. On one hand, humanity's existence was defined by servitude, their bodies bound to the will of their creators. On the other, their minds were beginning to soar, to reach for the stars their masters had come from. They were born to be slaves, but they were dreaming of freedom. They looked at their hands, calloused from digging the earth, and then looked to the heavens, and for the first time, they began to wonder if they too could one day reach for the stars. This was the great paradox of early humanity. Trapped between the mud of the earth and the fire of the gods, a new consciousness was being forged. The Anunnaki had come to Earth seeking gold to save their world, but in doing so, they had unintentionally ignited the spirit of a new species, a species that would one day inherit the planet and ask the very same questions of the universe that their creators once did. The age of servitude was ending, and the age of humanity, with all its struggles, triumphs, and unanswered questions, was about to begin. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into our mythic past, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that challenge what we think we know about history. See you next time.